While I'm skeptical of reparations, wrongs were clearly committed, and there would be some justice in a formal recognition of such wrongs, combined with a reparation payment. No payment would ever truly make up for slavery, Jim Crow, and other government and societal discrimination. And anything that would attempt to would be astronomically expensive. But a substantial token payment that is enough to help someone's life would still be a form of justice. The U.S. House of Representatives actually already apologized for slavery and Jim Crow in 2008, and the Senate apologized for slavery and segregation in 2009. However, no reparation came with these apologies. While some wrongs can be repaired with an apology, the massive and repeated evils poured upon blacks are not one of those wrongs. It certainly seems reasonable and fair to do more. I will explain why I'm skeptical of reparations later, but first, I should make a case for reparations. There are a lot of different ways to do it, and there are forms of reparations that I'd consider getting on board with. A reparations plan that I'd be apt to support would have 5 attributes involving who pays, who is paid, what is paid, the nature of the reparations, and finality. First, who is paying reparations is American society. When we're not thinking about groups, the person who pays reparations is the person who did the deed. If person A harms person B in an unethical way, person A apologizes and pays something to person B. This is not the simple case we're dealing with here. There wasn't one or a handful of people that wronged blacks. When going through the history, it's clear that it was essentially American society. The United States and Americans are group entities. When they as a whole harm someone, they as a whole are responsible for repairing the wrong. Likewise, it wasn't just a handful of people harmed, it was all enslaved Americans and their descendants. This leads into the second attribute of reparations. Who is being repaired? The aggrieved are not actually blacks, nor blacks living in the United States. The aggrieved are the descendants of slaves. Slave descendancy should be a requirement for reparation, meaning blacks that immigrated later would get nothing. It is true that immigrating blacks could also have been affected by discrimination, but not every act of discrimination rises to the level of reparation. The ancestors of the descendants of slaves were brought to this country against their will to be treated brutally and without dignity as they toiled enslaved. Upon freedom, they were treated like pariahs and taken advantage of repeatedly for 100 years before the 1960s civil rights movement. Black immigrants chose to come here, knowing to some extent what they were coming to, and many arrived after the worst of anti-black prejudice abated. The third attribute is what is paid. I'm someone who believes that the national debt matters, and printing money has consequences as well. Any reparations program will be expensive, and limiting that expense is important. The most straightforward way to pay reparations is with money. $20,000 to $30,000 to each descendant of slaves would be appropriate. Does this financially make up for all prejudice that blacks have faced? No, but reparations don't need to do that to be just. This would be a real amount of money that could truly help people's lives, but also relatively affordable. By receiving cash explicitly as an apology for the nation's wrongs, one can have a sense of true acknowledgement. $20,000 isn't just words, it's real money. It's a token compared to the height of the crimes, but it's real money that says we as a country acknowledge the wrongs and are sorry. It's not a claim of complete economic repair, but societal repair. I'm open to alternatives like baby bonds, but these seem more like programs to help the poor rather than a true apology, and reparations are for past wrongs. That leads to the fourth attribute. which is reparations are a formal recognition and payment for societal wrongs, not a welfare program. Thus, money is given to all descendants of American slaves regardless of wealth. If we want to help the poor, then we design programs to help the poor. That is not what this is, although it will benefit many poor blacks. Even those who have succeeded economically were wronged, so they are no less deserving of a reparation. Importantly, any reparations that I could get on board with must have this fifth attribute: finality. It must be clear that this is it. There is not a running of continuous payouts every decade or so. This is reparations paid. Is it as much money as many people want? No. But it is what society, through its democratic mechanisms, agreed to. It must generally be accepted that this is the only reparations the descendants of slaves will ever get for these issues. Of course, some will demand more. But if a great bulk of society, or blacks, demand more, then the reparations would have failed. Blacks must accept this as the formal apology and reparation. If they don't, then the reparations didn't work. Reparations can't help the healing process if the aggrieved don't accept the healing. One point to reparations is to move on from past wrongs. This isn't to say that we forget or don't teach this history to our children or don't make efforts to ensure we aren't discriminating today. But we can't let the wrongs of the past drag down the future. We have to move on as one people and all work to make our way in the world. We'd still want welfare for the poor and programs to help give opportunity to all Americans. Because a higher percentage of blacks are poor compared to whites, a higher percentage of blacks will continue to receive such funds. But this isn't reparations for past wrongs, but the programs of a just society to help all citizens flourish and live decently. The $20K check is a real symbol of sincere remorse. It's real in the sense that $20K isn't nothing. That can really help someone out. It's not like throwing $1 on someone and saying, "Sorry." This is real money, and when giving it to each descendant of an American slave, that's going to truly cost the country. But it's still a symbol because it, of course, doesn't literally make up for all that was lost due to racial prejudice. I'm quite sympathetic to a reparations plan that involves a sincere apology and a real symbol as a payment. A plan that effectively is the leaders of the country apologizing to the slaves and their descendants, with payment given to all in the aggrieved party, in such a way that is accepted as final. I'd want in the bill itself, as well as spoken by the president, while signing or describing the bill to the American people, a statement about the finality of this payment, clearly stating that this is it and no more will be paid. The statement would describe that this is a real symbol and formal apology, as well as that this doesn't end any current or future fights to create dignity and opportunity for all Americans who are disadvantaged for whatever reason. All this must be understood by the general public, for this is a public act of apology, compensation, and renewal. Welfare for the poor is different. All Americans don't need a public understanding of the spirit of welfare when it can work mechanistically to help those in need. Reparations, in contrast, are not simply a payment, but a recognition from society and government to the descendants of slaves that we have done great evils to your people, and we offer compensation as a real symbol of this recognition and in hope that the money will better your lives.